Hi.
When I stepped off the plane at Oakland International, it felt surreal. After years in the Air Force, bouncing from base to base and deployment to deployment, I was finally home. The city hadn't changed much, same streets, same skyline, but I was 27 now, no longer the kid who enlisted straight out of high school, hoping to escape a messy home life. My time in uniform had shaped me in ways I couldn't fully explain, but coming back felt like pressing pause on a life that kept moving without me. Susie wasn't there to greet me at the airport. That should have been my first clue. She'd texted earlier, saying she had errands to run and couldn't make it. "Sorry, babe. Can't wait to see you at home," was all she wrote. I shrugged it off. After all, Susie had been holding down the fort while I was gone. Maybe she was just busy. The house felt colder than I remembered, though. It wasn't the thermostat, it was Susie's smile when she finally walked through the door. Her hugs used to linger, but this one was brief, almost perfunctory. She smelled different too, like a new perfume she hadn't worn before. I told myself I was imagining things, but I couldn't shake the feeling. We had dinner that night, just the two of us, and it felt off. I asked about her job, her friends, her family. She gave short, clipped answers, like she was ticking off boxes in a survey. She didn't ask much about me, about the places I'd been, the things I'd seen. She wasn't curious, not the way she used to be. I chalked it up to nerves or maybe the adjustment of me being home again. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. Over the next few days, I threw myself into reconnecting with family. My twin brother John was quick to invite me over. He'd always been the outgoing one, the life of the party, and I was excited to catch up. When I got to his place, though, I noticed how carefully he avoided mentioning Susie. Every time her name came up, he'd change the subject or make a vague comment about how she'd been doing her own thing. It struck me as odd, but I didn't press him. Not yet. I spent a lot of time trying to adjust to civilian life. It wasn't easy. The steady hum of military routine had been replaced by the unpredictable pace of Oakland streets. I'd wake up early like always, but without the structure of base life, the days felt endless. I wanted to use this time to rebuild what Susie and I had. Our marriage had been strained by the distance, but I believed we could fix it now that I was home for good. That belief started to crack the night I borrowed her car. I was running late to meet an old friend for coffee and didn't want to hassle with parking my truck in the crowded downtown area. When I opened the glove compartment to grab her registration, just in case, I found a receipt. It was for a fancy dinner at a restaurant we'd never been to. Dated 3 weeks prior, it listed 2 entrees and a bottle of wine. I stared at it for what felt like forever, trying to piece together why Susie would have gone out to a place like that without telling me. A romantic dinner for 2 didn't exactly scream errands. When I got home, I asked her about it casually, trying not to sound accusatory. She froze for a second, just long enough for me to catch it, and then laughed it off. "Oh, that. It was just a work thing," she said, her voice a little too bright. "My boss treated us to dinner after a late meeting. It didn't sit right with me, but I let it slide. At least, for the moment." That night, as Susie slept, I stared at the ceiling, my mind racing. I told myself I was being paranoid, that deployment had made me hypervigilant. But something about her distant eyes and forced laughter gnawed at me. The next day, I called John to meet for beers, hoping a little sibling time might clear my head. He seemed reluctant at first but agreed to hang out. As we sat in the corner booth of a dive bar, laughing about old times, I noticed he wouldn't quite meet my eyes when I mentioned Susie again. It was like there was a wall between us that hadn't been there before. That's when it hit me. Whatever was going on, John knew something. And he wasn't telling me. The beers didn't taste the same anymore. Every sip felt heavy, like it carried the weight of whatever secret John was hiding. I didn't push him that night. I didn't know how to. Instead, I played along, laughing at his jokes and pretending I didn't notice the tension. But when I left the bar, I sat in my truck for a good 15 minutes, staring at my hands on the steering wheel. Something was wrong, and it wasn't just Susie. I spent the next week trying to get back to normal. I fixed up the house, ran errands, and checked in with old friends. But no matter how busy I kept myself, the questions lingered. Every time Susie's phone buzzed, I'd glance over, hoping to catch a name or a text. She was careful though, keeping her phone face down or in her pocket. She'd always been casual about it before, leaving it on the counter or tossing it onto the couch. Now, it was like she had something to hide. The turning point came a few days later. I was out for a walk when my mom called. She wanted to know how things were going, if Susie and I were adjusting to life together again. Her voice was cheerful, almost too much so, and I could hear the subtle questions she wasn't asking. "It's good," I lied. "We're figuring it out." "Well, that's nice to hear," she said. "You know, it's great how supportive you've been. Not every man would be so understanding about the situation." The words hit me like a brick. "What situation?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. There was a pause on the other end. "Oh, nothing, sweetheart. I just mean with all the time apart. Marriage takes work, you know." I could hear the nervous edge in her voice, the way she was trying to cover up whatever she'd just let slip. "Yeah, of course," I said, forcing a laugh. "Gotta get back to it, Mom. I'll call you later." I hung up and leaned against a streetlight, my heart pounding. My mom wasn't the type to bring up vague situations, unless there was something real behind it. I started piecing things together. The coldness from Susie, the awkwardness from John, the way my parents seemed so cheerful about me being home but avoided real conversations. It didn't make sense. That night, I decided to dig deeper. Susie was out late, claiming she was catching up with an old coworker. I didn't even pretend to believe her. After she left, I went to her side of the closet. I hadn't touched her things since I'd come home, trying to give her space. Now though, I wasn't worried about boundaries. I needed answers. At first, I didn't find anything unusual. Clothes, shoes, the same perfume she'd worn for years. But then I spotted something tucked into the back of the shelf, a small gift bag. I pulled it out and found a box inside, wrapped in tissue paper. My hands shook as I unfolded the paper, revealing a sleek men's watch. It was expensive, far too nice for me to ever buy, and it was engraved. "To John, with all my love. S." My breath caught in my throat. The room spun. I gripped the edge of the dresser, staring at the watch like it was going to explode. There was no mistaking it. She wasn't just cheating, she was cheating with my own brother. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I didn't do anything for a long time, just sat on the edge of the bed, clutching the watch like it might give me more answers. The betrayal felt so sharp, so personal. My mind raced back to every moment I'd spent with John since I'd come home, trying to figure out how I'd missed the signs. Had they been laughing at me behind my back? Had they planned this? Susie came home late, the click of her heels echoing in the hallway. I shoved the bag back into the closet and stood there, trying to keep my breathing steady. When she walked in, she smiled faintly. "Hey, you're still up?" "Yeah," I said, forcing a calm tone. "Just couldn't sleep." She tilted her head, studying me for a moment. I wondered if she could see the anger simmering under the surface. "You okay?" "I'm fine," I said. But I wasn't. Not even close. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat in the living room, staring out the window, running through every possible way to confront Susie and John. The betrayal felt too big to handle calmly, but I knew if I went at it the wrong way, they'd just deny everything or twist the story. I needed to play it smart. The next morning, I waited for Susie to leave for work. Once I heard the front door close and her car pull away, I called John. It took a few rings before he answered, his voice groggy. "Hey Joe, what's up? You busy today?" I asked, keeping my tone casual. Not really." "Why?" "Thought we could hang out. Grab some lunch, maybe." He hesitated, and I could almost hear the wheels turning in his head. "Yeah, sure. Where?" "My place," I said. "Come by around noon." "All right," he replied, though he sounded uneasy. When he showed up later, I was waiting in the kitchen, nursing a cup of coffee I didn't even want. John walked in, his usual grin plastered on his face, but it faltered when he saw my expression. "You okay, man? You look like you've been up all night." I gestured to the chair across from me. "Sit down." He laughed nervously, scratching the back of his neck. "What's this about?" "Just sit," I said, my voice firm. He dropped into the chair, looking more uneasy by the second. I slid the watch across the table, watching his face carefully as he picked it up. His smile disappeared entirely. "What's this?" he asked, his voice tight. "You tell me," I said. "Found it in Susie's closet." He set the watch down like it burned his hand. "Joe, Save it," I snapped, cutting him off. "I want the truth, John. How long has this been going on?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he buried his face in his hands, muttering something I couldn't make out. When he finally looked up, his eyes were red. "Joe, I swear, I didn't mean for any of this to happen. Didn't mean for it to happen?" I repeated, my voice rising. "You didn't mean to sleep with my wife? You didn't mean to stab me in the back?" He flinched but didn't deny it. "That hurt more than anything. It started a few months after you left for deployment," he admitted. "I don't know, we just connected." I wanted to punch him right there. My fists clenched, my whole body tensing, but I forced myself to stay in control. "Connected," I repeated, my voice trembling. "She's my wife, John. My wife. And you're my brother. How could you?" "I didn't want this," he interrupted, his voice desperate. It just happened, okay? She was lonely, I don't know. It was a mistake. A mistake." I laughed bitterly. "A mistake is one time. You've been seeing her for years, haven't you?" He didn't answer, but the guilty look on his face told me everything I needed to know. My stomach churned, and I felt like I was going to be sick. "And what about Mom and Dad?" I asked. "Do they know about this?" He hesitated, and my heart sank. "They think you knew," he said quietly. "Susie, she told them you were okay with it." I stared at him, stunned. "Are you serious?" John nodded, his eyes glued to the floor. "She said you had an agreement. That you, I don't know, accepted it." My blood ran cold. Not only had they betrayed me, but they dragged my parents into it too. My own family thought I was complicit in this mess. The betrayal was layered in lies, each one more devastating than the last. I stood up abruptly, the chair scraping against the floor. John flinched, like he thought I might hit him. And for a moment, I wanted to. But instead, I pointed to the door. "Get out. Joe. Get out." My voice was ice cold, and he didn't argue. He grabbed his jacket and left without another word, leaving me alone in the kitchen. I sat back down, my hands trembling. I had the truth now, but it didn't make me feel better. If anything, the weight of it threatened to crush me. But I wasn't done yet. There was still Susie. And she had no idea what was coming. When Susie got home that evening, I was waiting for her. She walked through the door, smiling like nothing was wrong, like she hadn't torn my life apart. It made my skin crawl. "Hey," she said casually, dropping her purse on the counter. "What's for dinner?" I stayed seated at the kitchen table, staring at her. "We need to talk." Her smile faltered. "What about?" I slid the watch across the table. Her eyes flicked down to it, and I saw the color drain from her face. For a moment, she didn't say anything. Then she tried to laugh it off. "What's this?" "You tell me," I said, my voice steady. "You bought it for John, didn't you?" She froze, her lips parting like she wanted to deny it. Instead, she sighed and sank into the chair across from me. "Joe, it's not what you think. Really," I said, leaning forward. "Because I think my wife's been having an affair with my brother for years. And apparently, my parents think I've been okay with it. So, explain to me how it's not what I think." She flinched at the anger in my voice, but didn't deny it. "I never wanted you to find out like this," she murmured. "Oh, so I was supposed to just keep playing the fool? Keep raising my glass to you and John while you laughed behind my back?" My voice rose, but I forced myself to stay seated. "It wasn't like that," she said quickly. "I was lonely, Joe. You were gone for so long, and I didn't know how to handle it." "That's your excuse?" I asked bitterly. "I sacrificed everything for us, for you. And you repay me by sleeping with my brother." Tears welled up in her eyes, but they didn't move me. "I made a mistake," she said softly. "It just happened." "You've been lying to me for years," I shot back. "This wasn't some one-time mistake, Susie. This was calculated." She wiped at her tears, her face crumbling. "I didn't mean for it to go on like this. I wanted to stop, but what?" I snapped. "You couldn't let go of him? You had to have both of us." She didn't answer. Instead, she reached across the table, her hand trembling. "Joe, I love you. I always have." I pulled my hand away, standing up. "You don't get to say that anymore." The room went silent. She sat there, tears streaming down her face, but I didn't care. This wasn't a woman who'd made a mistake. This was someone who had betrayed me in the worst way possible and then lied to cover it up. "I'm leaving," I said firmly. "I don't care what you do after this, but I'm done." Her sobs grew louder as I grabbed my keys and walked out the door. Let her cry. She'd made her bed, now she could lie in it. I didn't go far. Just drove to a park near the bay, parked the truck, and sat there watching the waves. My hands wouldn't stop shaking, my chest felt tight, and my thoughts raced so fast I couldn't hold onto one for more than a second. I tried to think of where to go next. Back to the house? No. I couldn't look at her right now. My parents? Not after what John told me. Every safe place I thought of suddenly felt tainted, like there wasn't a single part of my life that wasn't touched by this mess. Eventually, I called my old friend Greg. He'd been my wingman in high school, and though we hadn't stayed as close over the years, I knew he'd answer. "Joe? Man, it's been forever," he said when he picked up, his voice as familiar as a warm handshake. "Hey Greg," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "You busy?" "Not really," he said. "What's up?" "I need a place to crash for a bit. Can we talk in person?" There was a pause on the line. Then, "Yeah, of course. Come on over." Greg's place was exactly what I needed, a messy bachelor pad that didn't feel tied to any part of my old life. He handed me a beer when I walked in, but I didn't drink it right away. Instead, I told him everything. "Jesus Christ, Joe," he said when I was done. "Your brother? That's messed up." "Yeah," I said, staring at the untouched beer in my hand. "And my parents? They believed it. They thought I knew and didn't care." Greg shook his head, leaning back in his chair. "I mean, you've got to set the record straight with them. They deserve to know the truth." "Do they?" I snapped, the anger bubbling up again. "Because if they'd bothered to ask me, they'd already know." Greg raised his hands in surrender. "All right, fair. But what about Susie? You really done with her?" I thought about it. The image of her sitting at the table, crying, flashed in my mind, but I pushed it away. "Yeah. I can't stay in that house. It's over." He nodded. "Good. Then you've got to start figuring out your next move. You staying here in Oakland?" "I don't know yet," I admitted. "I need time to think." That night, lying on Greg's worn-out couch, I stared at the ceiling, replaying every moment of the last few days in my head. The betrayal wasn't just about Susie and John. It was about the life I thought I was building, the sacrifices I'd made, and the trust I'd placed in people who didn't deserve it. The next morning, I woke up to a text from my mom. "We need to talk." I stared at it for a long time, my thumb hovering over the screen. Finally, I replied, "Yeah, we do." When I pulled into my parents' driveway, my stomach churned like I was heading into a combat zone. I'd barely slept at Greg's place, and every mile of the drive felt heavier than the last. Their house hadn't changed, a neat suburban two-story with flowers my mom planted out front, but it didn't feel like home anymore. Mom opened the door before I could knock. "Joe," she said, her voice soft and unsure, like she didn't know if I was there as her son or her accuser. "Mom," I said, stepping inside. "Where's Dad?" "In the living room," she replied, wringing her hands. "We've been waiting." When I walked in, Dad was sitting in his recliner, flipping through a newspaper he clearly wasn't reading. He glanced up at me, his face guarded. "Joe." "Dad." The silence stretched between us like a canyon. Finally, I sat down on the couch across from them, gripping my knees to keep my hands from shaking. "You knew about Susie and John," I said, cutting straight to the point. Mom gasped, and Dad winced, his eyes narrowing. "Joe, it's not what you think." "What I think," I interrupted, my voice trembling with controlled rage, "is that my wife and my brother have been screwing behind my back, and you both believed I was okay with it." Mom's hand flew to her mouth, tears welling up. "Susie said, she said you knew. That you two had an arrangement. She seemed so sure. And you just believed her?" I shot back. "You didn't think to ask me? To even call me and check?" Dad finally spoke, his voice gruff. "What were we supposed to think, Joe? You were gone for years, and Susie acted like it was no big deal. John said the same thing. Because they're liars," I snapped. "How could you not see that?" Dad's jaw tightened, and for a moment, I thought he might argue. Instead, he leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "We messed up," he admitted. "I should have called you. I should have. I don't know, done something." Mom was crying openly now. "I just wanted to believe everything was okay," she said through sobs. I didn't want to lose you or John. You've lost me now, I said flatly. Because I can't trust either of you. The words landed like a bomb. Mom's crying turned into hiccuping gasps, and Dad's face hardened. That's not fair, he said. We didn't cheat on you. We didn't betray you. No, but you stood by and let it happen, I countered. You let John stay here, like what he did was normal. Like it didn't matter. Dad stood up, towering over me. Don't talk to your mother like that. She's not the enemy here. Neither am I shot back, standing to meet his glare. But you sure treated me like one. The tension hung thick in the air. Finally, Dad sighed and sat back down, shaking his head. I don't know how to fix this, he muttered. You can't, I said, my voice cold. I'm done with John. And I'm done with anyone who took his side, even for a second. I walked out without another word, my mom's sobs echoing behind me. As I climbed into my truck, my hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. I thought cutting off John and Susie would be the hardest part, but leaving my parents like that? That was worse. After leaving my parents' house, I drove aimlessly around Oakland. The city felt smaller somehow, like there wasn't enough room to escape the weight of everything pressing down on me. Every corner, every street seemed to hold a memory of my old life, a life that didn't exist anymore. I ended up back at Greg's, walking in like a man on autopilot. He was in the middle of a game on his PlayStation, but when he saw my face, he paused it and set the controller down. Rough talk, he asked. Yeah, I muttered, dropping onto the couch. They believed Susie. Believed John. Didn't even think to ask me. Greg shook his head, leaning back. Man, that's brutal. It's not just brutal, it's done, I said firmly. I told them I can't trust them anymore. If they're okay keeping John in their lives after what he did, then they don't need me around. Greg whistled low. That's a big step. It's the only step, I replied, staring at the floor. If they want to play happy family with John, fine. I'm not part of it. He didn't argue, and I was grateful for that. Instead, he just handed me a beer. You figure out what you're gonna do yet? Stay here or head somewhere else? I don't know, I admitted. I can't stay in the house with Susie. But I don't want to feel like I'm running away either. Sometimes leaving isn't running away, it's just moving forward, Greg said simply. That stuck with me. Maybe leaving Oakland wasn't about avoiding the pain, it was about giving myself the chance to start over, to build something without the ghosts of betrayal haunting every corner. The next day, I went back to the house while Susie was at work. I wasn't there to talk, I was there to pack. I grabbed my clothes, my personal stuff, and a few photos of my time in the Air Force. Everything else could stay. I didn't want reminders of a life built on lies. As I was hauling the last box to my truck, Susie pulled into the driveway. She froze when she saw me, her face a mix of panic and desperation. Joe, wait, she called, rushing toward me. Can we talk? Please. I slammed the tailgate shut and turned to face her. There's nothing to talk about. Don't do this, she begged, her voice cracking. We can fix this. I know we can. I laughed bitterly. Fix this? You didn't just cheat, Susie. You betrayed me with my own brother. You lied to my parents and turned them against me. How do you fix that? Tears streamed down her face, but I didn't feel any sympathy. Not anymore. I made mistakes, she said, her voice trembling. But I still love you, Joe. I want to make it right. You had years to make it right, I said coldly. And you chose him. I'm done. I climbed into the truck and drove off without looking back. My heart felt heavy, but for the first time in weeks, my mind was clear. I wasn't just leaving Susie, I was leaving the pain, the lies, and the weight of everything they'd done to me. The next few days felt like walking through a fog. I stayed at Greg's, barely speaking, just going through the motions. He gave me space, only breaking the silence when he'd throw me a casual "you good?" or offer me food. It wasn't much, but it helped. Once the dust started to settle, I realized I couldn't live like this forever. I had to take control of my life again. First, I called a real estate agent and told her I wanted to sell the house. I wasn't interested in haggling over it with Susie, I just wanted it gone. She didn't fight me on it when I told her. Maybe she realized she had no ground to stand on, or maybe she was too worn down from everything blowing up. Either way, I didn't care. The house went on the market within a week. Next, I started looking for jobs. I wasn't in the mood to go back to school or spend years climbing corporate ladders. I needed something simple, something steady. That's when I saw an opening with an aviation company in Seattle. They needed someone with my skills, and the pay was decent. More importantly, it was far from Oakland. I applied the same day. While I waited for a response, I spent hours cleaning out my phone, blocking numbers, deleting old photos, cutting off ties with anyone who reminded me of the mess I was leaving behind. It felt ruthless, but also liberating. I didn't need reminders of people who had failed me. Then, out of nowhere, Maddie called. Maddie, my high school sweetheart. We dated for 3 years, back when life was simple and love felt easy. Things didn't work out when I enlisted, but we'd stayed friendly enough over the years. Joe, she said when I answered, her voice bright but cautious. I heard you were back in town. Hey Maddie, I said, surprised. Yeah, I'm back. For now. Greg told me what happened, she said gently. I'm sorry, Joe. That's awful. Yeah, I muttered. It is. Well, if you need a distraction, I was thinking we could grab coffee or something. No pressure. For the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of warmth in my chest. Yeah, I said after a pause. I'd like that. We met at a little cafe downtown. She looked just like I remembered, her bright smile, the way her laugh filled a room. For the first hour, we stuck to safe topics, catching up on old times. But eventually, the conversation turned to what had happened. I can't believe John would do that to you, she said, shaking her head. And Susie? She didn't even try to stop it. Nope, I said bitterly. She was too busy telling everyone it was fine, like I'd signed off on it or something. Maddie's eyes softened. You didn't deserve that, Joe. You're a good guy. Hearing her say that felt like a bomb on an open wound. For so long, I'd been caught in a storm of lies and betrayal. But sitting there with Maddie, I felt a sliver of hope. Maybe I could find something real again, something honest. When we left the cafe, she hugged me tightly. Take care of yourself, okay, she said, her voice warm. And call me if you need anything. As I watched her walk away, I realized I wanted to see her again. For the first time in weeks, I felt like maybe, just maybe, I had something to look forward to. A week after I met Maddie, I got the call from the aviation company in Seattle. They wanted to move forward with my application and scheduled a phone interview. When I hung up, I felt a mix of relief and anxiety. Relief because this was my chance to start over somewhere far away. Anxiety because leaving Oakland for good meant closing the door on everything, good and bad. Greg was the first person I told. He grinned, clapping me on the back. That's huge, man. Seattle's nice. Fresh start and all that. Yeah, I said, though I couldn't ignore the nagging feeling in my gut. It's what I need. He nodded. You've got this. And hey, don't overthink it. You've already survived the worst of it. His words stayed with me as I prepared for the interview. It went well. My experience in the Air Force was a perfect fit for what they needed. By the end of the call, they'd offered me the job. I accepted on the spot. I spent the next week tying up loose ends. The house sold faster than I expected, and while the price wasn't ideal, it was good enough. I transferred the money to an account I didn't share with Susie. Whatever was left after splitting things with her would be plenty for me to start fresh. I also met Maddie again, this time for dinner. It wasn't a date, at least not officially, but something about being with her felt different. She had a way of making me feel grounded, like the weight of the betrayal didn't define me. We talked about everything, my new job, her work as a teacher, our families. It was easy, like slipping into an old comfortable pair of shoes. At the end of the night, she smiled at me as we stood by her car. You seem lighter, she said. Like you're starting to find your footing again. Maybe I am, I said, surprised by how much I meant it. And you're part of that, Maddie. Seeing you again, it's been good for me. Her cheeks flushed, and for a moment, she looked like the girl I'd fallen for all those years ago. I'm glad, she said softly. I've missed having you in my life. We stood there for a beat longer than necessary. The air felt charged, like we both wanted to say more but didn't. Finally, she hugged me and drove off, leaving me standing there with a strange mix of hope and regret. That night, I lay awake thinking about her. I wasn't ready to jump into anything serious, not with all the baggage I was still carrying. But Maddie felt like a chance at something real. Something worth exploring, if I had the courage to take it. A few days later, I packed up my truck and left Oakland behind. As I crossed the city limits, I felt a pang of sadness, but it was quickly replaced by something stronger: determination. I was heading to Seattle, to a new job, a new city, and maybe a new future. Maddie called as I hit the freeway. "Hey," she said. "I just wanted to wish you luck. I know you're going to do great up there." "Thanks, Maddie," I said, gripping the wheel tighter. "And hey, don't be a stranger, all right?" Her laugh was soft but full of promise. "I won't be. Take care, Joe." As the miles stretched out ahead of me, I realized I wasn't just leaving the pain behind. I was chasing something better. For the first time in years, I felt free. Seattle welcomed me with gray skies and misty rain, but it felt like a clean slate. I rented a modest apartment near the outskirts of the city, not fancy, but it had enough space for me to feel comfortable. My first day at the aviation company came quickly, and I threw myself into the work. It was technical, hands-on, and reminded me of the structured life I'd had in the Air Force. It felt good to be busy again. The people at work were friendly but professional, and while I didn't open up much about my past, I appreciated the fresh interactions. Nobody here knew about Susie, John, or the mess I'd left behind in Oakland. It was a relief to just be Joe, the new guy with a solid work ethic. Despite the progress, my nights were still a little lonely. I'd stare at the ceiling, my thoughts drifting back to Maddie. We texted often, small updates about our days, random jokes, the kind of easy banter we'd had in high school. Every time my phone buzzed with her name, it brought a small flicker of happiness. A month after I moved, she called me late one evening. "Hey Joe," she said, her voice warm. "How's Seattle treating you?" "Not bad," I said, propping my feet up on the coffee table. "The job's good. Still getting used to all the rain though." She laughed. "Sounds about right. So, I was thinking about coming up for a visit. I have a long weekend coming up, and it'd be nice to catch up in person." Her words caught me off guard, but the idea lit something inside me. "Yeah," I said after a pause. "I'd like that. I'll even play tour guide." "Deal," she said with a smile in her voice. "Let me know what weekend works for you." After we hung up, I couldn't stop smiling. The idea of seeing Maddie again made Seattle feel less like an escape and more like the start of something new. But at the same time, I felt nervous. What if I wasn't ready? What if the baggage from my past ruined things before they even started? When the weekend arrived, I picked Maddie up from the airport. She looked as radiant as ever, her smile lighting up the rainy day. "Wow," she said, stepping out of the terminal. "You weren't kidding about the rain." "It's part of the charm," I said, grinning. I spent the weekend showing her around the city. We explored Pike Place Market, visited the Space Needle, and even took a ferry ride to Bainbridge Island. It felt effortless, like no time had passed since high school. But there were moments, quiet ones, where the connection between us felt deeper than it had back then. On her last night, we sat in a cozy little cafe near my apartment, sipping coffee. Maddie looked at me, her expression serious. "Joe, can I ask you something?" "Of course," I said, setting my cup down. "Do you think you're ready to move forward? With anything, or anyone?" Her voice was gentle but direct, and I knew what she was really asking. I took a deep breath, my thoughts spinning. "I think so," I said honestly. "It's not easy, letting go of the past. But being here with you, it makes me feel like I can." Her smile was small but hopeful. "I don't want to rush you," she said softly. "But I want you to know I'm here, for whatever you need." That night, as I dropped her off at her hotel, she hugged me tightly. "I'll miss you, Joe," she whispered. "I'll miss you too," I replied, holding on just a little longer. As I drove home, the city lights reflecting off the wet streets, I realized something important. I wasn't fully healed yet, but I was getting there. And with Maddie by my side, I was starting to believe I could rebuild, not just my life but my heart. The day Maddie flew back home, the apartment felt emptier. I kept replaying moments from the weekend, her laugh at Pike Place Market, the way she leaned into the ferry's breeze. She'd left me with something I hadn't felt in a long time: hope. We talked more after her visit, texts turning into regular calls. It wasn't just small talk. She made me feel grounded, like I wasn't defined by my mistakes or my past. Slowly, she became a part of my new normal. Work kept me busy, and I started to find a rhythm. The days felt purposeful again, and my boss even hinted at a promotion. But nights were harder. Sometimes, Memories of John and Susie crept in, reopening wounds I thought were healing. I wanted to forget, but the past didn't let go easily. One evening during a call, Maddie brought up something I hadn't considered. "Joe, have you thought about confronting John? Not for him, but for you." I hadn't. "What's the point?" I asked. "He knows what he did." "Maybe it's not about him," she said softly. "Maybe it's about letting yourself close that chapter." Her words stuck with me. The idea scared me, but it also made sense. I needed to say what I'd been holding in, not for John's benefit, but for mine. The next day, I texted John, "We need to talk." We met in a park in Oakland, a place that used to feel like home. He was already there, sitting stiffly on a bench. When I approached, he stood, unsure whether to smile or brace for impact. "I'm not here to forgive you," I said, getting straight to it. "I'm here because I need to say this. You destroyed everything. You broke the trust between us. And for what? My wife." John's face fell. "Joe, I know." "No," I cut him off. "You don't get to explain or justify it. You lied to me, to our family, and made me the fool." He nodded, his voice low. "I'm sorry. For all of it." I stared at him, searching for any trace of the brother I used to know. "Good," I said finally. "Now live with it." I walked away before he could say anything else. My heart pounded, but I felt lighter. It wasn't about John, it was about me taking back control of my story. That night, I called Maddie. "You were right," I told her. "It didn't fix anything, but it helped." Her voice was soft. "I'm proud of you, Joe." For the first time in a long while, I truly believed I could move forward. After confronting John, something shifted in me. The anger didn't disappear, but it stopped controlling me. I no longer felt like I was dragging the weight of betrayal everywhere I went. For the first time, I could breathe a little easier. Maddie and I kept talking, and our conversations grew deeper. One evening, she surprised me. "I've been thinking, Joe," she said during a call, her voice hesitant. "What if I came out to Seattle for a while? Not just for a visit, something more permanent." Her words stunned me. "You mean move here?" "Yeah," she said softly. "I'm not saying tomorrow, but I'm ready for a change. I love teaching, but there are schools in Seattle too. And being closer to you feels right." I didn't know what to say at first. A part of me worried it was too soon, that I wasn't ready. But another part, the part that lit up every time she called, wanted to say yes. "Are you sure?" I asked. "That's a big step." "I'm sure," she said. "I've been sure since I saw you at the airport." Her words hit me straight in the chest. After everything, I didn't think I could trust anyone with my heart again. But Maddie wasn't just anyone. "Then let's do it," I said, surprising myself with the confidence in my voice. Over the next few weeks, Maddie started making plans to transition to Seattle. She interviewed with a few schools and found one that was thrilled to have her. In the meantime, we talked about what her move would look like, where she'd stay, what we'd do together, how we'd balance her new life with mine. Work was going well for me too. The promotion I'd been eyeing finally came through, and with it, the means to support a new chapter of my life. I started to feel like the pieces were falling into place. The day Maddie officially arrived in Seattle, I picked her up from the airport, just like before. Only this time, it wasn't a visit, it was the start of something real. As she walked toward me, her suitcase in hand, I realized how different this felt. This wasn't just nostalgia or a second chance. It was the beginning of something new, built on honesty, respect, and trust. "You ready?" I asked as she reached me. She smiled, her eyes bright with excitement. "I am if you are." I grabbed her bag, and we walked out together into the rainy Seattle evening. This time, I wasn't looking back. Everything I needed was right in front of me. Maddie's move to Seattle felt like the start of a new life for both of us. She found a cozy apartment just a few blocks from mine, close enough to visit often but far enough for us to still have our own space. Her first few weeks were a whirlwind of unpacking, exploring the city, and getting settled into her new teaching job. Watching her dive into her work with so much energy reminded me why I'd fallen for her all those years ago. We eased into our relationship naturally. There were no grand declarations or rushed decisions, just simple moments of connection. Dinners at my place turned into her bringing over groceries and cooking her favorite recipes. Lazy Sundays became trips to farmers markets or quiet afternoons watching the rain from my window. One evening, Maddie surprised me with a home-cooked meal. She set the table with candles and even brought dessert. "What's the occasion?" I asked as I sat down. "Just felt like celebrating," she said, her smile warm. "You, us, everything." As we ate, we talked about how far we'd come. "You seem lighter," she said. "Like you're finally letting go of what happened." "I think I am," I admitted. "It's still there sometimes, but it doesn't own me anymore. And that's because of you." She reached across the table, her hand resting on mine. "No, that's because of you, Joe. You made the choice to rebuild. I just got lucky enough to be here for it." Her words stayed with me. Maddie wasn't just part of my healing, she was helping me believe in the possibility of something better. That weekend, we took a day trip to Mount Rainier. It was her idea, a chance to explore and take in the beauty of the Pacific Northwest. As we hiked through the trails, she stopped to take photos of the snow-covered peaks and towering evergreens. At one point, she turned to me, her face glowing with happiness. "This place feels like a fresh start," she said. "It is," I replied. "For both of us." We reached a clearing with a stunning view of the mountain, and she pulled me into a hug. "Thank you for letting me be part of this, Joe. You've made me feel like I belong here." "You do," I said simply. That night, as we sat by the fire back at my apartment, she leaned her head on my shoulder. "This feels like home," she whispered. And it did. For the first time in years, I felt like I wasn't just surviving, I was building a life worth living. One step at a time, Maddie and I were creating something strong, something real. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I was happy. Maddie and I settled into a rhythm that felt natural. Weeknights were a mix of dinners, walks, and sharing stories about our days. Weekends became adventures, hikes, trying new restaurants, or just exploring Seattle. Life wasn't flashy, but it was steady and full of warmth. One night, after a quiet dinner at her apartment, she asked, "Do you ever think about what's next for us?" I paused, not because I didn't have an answer, but because I wanted to choose the right words. "I think about it a lot," I admitted. "And I know I want you in it, whatever that looks like." Her smile lit up the room. "Me too." That simple exchange said everything we needed. There were no big promises or plans, just an understanding that we were building something strong, something that felt right. The next day, I finally unpacked the last box from my move. As I sorted through the contents, I found an old photo of Maddie and me from high school. We were grinning, arms slung around each other, carefree. I placed it on my desk, a quiet reminder of how far we'd come, and how much we'd rebuilt. Life wasn't perfect, but it was ours. And for the first time in years, the future felt bright. Maddie and I didn't need grand gestures to feel secure, we just kept showing up for each other. Every moment, big or small, felt like another brick in the foundation we were building. One evening, as we walked along the waterfront, she slipped her hand into mine. "You know," she said softly, "this feels like where I'm supposed to be." "Me too," I replied, squeezing her hand. We didn't say much else, but we didn't need to. The unspoken understanding between us was enough. That night, as we sat on my couch watching the rain, I realized something. My life wasn't just about recovering anymore, it was about living. And with Maddie by my side, I knew I was finally on the right path.
Bye.